Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Red Shirt Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Mazakuta. Today we're joined with Gary Hudiburgh, a candidate for South Dakota House of Representatives, who has been working at an intersection of youth mentorship, workforce development, and community leadership across the region. Gary is also involved in initiatives like SotaSoDak and the Dakota Bridge Cooperative, where he's helping create real pathways for young people to gain skills, mentorship, and career opportunities, especially in rural and tribal communities. Gary, thank you for joining us today. You've said something that really stood out to me. You said that the talent is already there, the work ethic is there, but the pathway has been missing. What do you mean by that, and what does the pathway look like for the people, the young people today?
Jonathan, thank you very much. It's an honor to be on this podcast, and I appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak. This pathway, when we talk about it, is so much about we have a very unique environment in South Dakota and across the Midwest, where we have people that have been brought up in very hardworking environments, oftentimes in areas where we're able to thrive in challenging environments. Winter here can be pretty difficult. And so that character and that strength is something that with all the things that we have building within our communities, there's a great opportunity now to be able to find pathways to help young people to be able to find ways to thrive, to be able to develop economically, and to be able to help us build our infrastructure for now and long into the future.
Across South Dakota and the broader region, many young people are dealing with the isolation, the lack of direction, and the limited opportunities, like you say. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges young people in the rural community are facing right now?
The area that I see the most, so I've been operational with SotaSoDak for 4 years, which is a program to be able to help young people find faith, to be able to find workforce development skill sets, and then to be able to find thriving. And the thing that I see and that I've seen the most is that sometimes you're in an environment that's a little bit austere. So maybe you don't have a lot of resources. Maybe it's an environment where there's poverty, there's addiction, any of these different challenges. And if you can be able to bring adults in a mentorship relationship or even other community members that are currently working in these thriving environments where it's either in the skilled trades, it's working for the cities, whatever it is. There's so many different roles that we're looking for people, but where we can be able to find the pathway where people who might not necessarily thrive in school, might not appreciate school, can be able to find an environment where they can learn, they can be able to grow, and they can be able to develop successfully to be fully independent, to be thriving, and to really have that knowledge that their work contributes to the greater working of our society.
And I think the hands-on opportunities that you're creating is really a big part of, that work and it sticking with the students and carrying it into their workforce career. So speaking of Soda, can you explain the mission behind the organization as a whole and what actually happens during one of your Saturday youth workshops? Could you explain a little bit what those look like?
So SotaSoDak is a unique word, and I always like to explain it. It's the last four letters of Minnesota, the first two letters of the South, three letters of Dakota. So it's a matter of blending. I live in a border town, so my name's Gary, and I live in the town of Gary, and my dad's name's Gary too. So there's multiple ways that it works. But the formation of the organization was based upon a conversation I had with a young man across the street from me when he was about 14 years old, and I asked him, "What is he doing all summer?" He said he was going to play video games. He was really excited. He had just gotten 6 new video games. He was going to just play video games and hang out. And in my heart, I mean, there was a little bit of it that broke, where it's, like, I remember doing those sorts of things. For most of the last 10 years, I've worked in the energy industry. So I would travel, I'd work very intensive schedule, come home. I have a house in South Dakota, and I would just have that opportunity to be able to talk. And so talked to this young man. He said he was going to play video games all summer. I asked him if he knew how to weld. And so we started welding in the backyard of my house. We had a couple projects that he came up with. And it was just like, you can see where you create that spark of inspiration, where you can be able to help somebody see that they have agency, that they're capable, that they're knowledgeable, that their contribution is valid. And so by being able to create that opportunity, you can completely change what the environment is for that young person. We've got one young person that we've been working with that program for that time period. And they literally just got an apartment at 18 years old. And they had come from a very challenging environment. They'd worked with us for a while. We're going to high school. High school was really challenging for them. And we ended up developing relationships with some of the farmers in our area. And so for about a year, he was installing agricultural tile. And so he learned about working with heavy equipment. He learned about how to be able to work on a team. He learned how to be able to get all of these things. And then from that, we ended up finding an opportunity with the county and the county highway department. And now he's working for $22 an hour. He's got a good, solid 40-hour a week job. He has so many other things that he's involved in, but it gives him that solid base. He literally just got an apartment in town, and it's seeing these pathways develop. We have a very, very strong faith focus, but for what we're doing, we really look at being present for people. You know, when we look at the gospel for what we're doing with SotaSoDak, it's about being present, about being able to demonstrate. It's not hitting anybody over the head with the Bible, but it's about being able to share what's in our hearts, what's the good, what's the gratitude, and how we can be able to demonstrate that love to the larger community, very much being the hands and feet.
I think all of the spiritualities really do, it comes down to working, getting to the ground and, being a part of your community. That's a huge part of what your work focuses on, is that hands-on trades like welding, carpentry, and mechanical skills. Why did you decide to focus on those kinds of skills as a foundation for mentoring young people? Is it that was your skill set? And then 'cause I know you say you worked in tech too. So did you plan on expanding that into technology at all?
We were just guided in what we developed. I mean, for welding, it's usually a $25 an hour job just about anywhere in the country, like as an entry point. So if we can teach a young person how to weld, often we'll get kids that are really struggling in school. And there's some sort of disconnect. And it can be, we think about generational trauma, we think about uh, bullying, all of these different aspects where it can make it really difficult to be able to thrive in school. And so school at times becomes an unsafe environment, or it's perceived as an unsafe environment. Whereas if we can look at welding, for kids that they say they have ADHD, I don't know, pro or con on it, but you start welding and you get this, you're like, okay, I'm joining metal and I'm joining it really well. And I've got one kid that was involved in the program, and he's been expelled from school, but he's one of the best welders I know. And we had a project we were working on that was a hay trailer that had a broken tongue. And I mean, I think we probably put 50 pounds of welding rod on that, being able to get everybody started, because we would just sit, we'd sit across from each other, and one person would run a bead, the other person would run a bead on either side, and you would just build it up. So, I mean, I had some skill set with welding. The other piece is it's just, these are the logical steps that our young people can pick up really quick. And they don't require sitting in a classroom. They don't require having, all these other backgrounds. And so much of the math I can teach them, and we can be able to develop quickly. And so it's not a matter of going and taking away, or, we look at this concept of asset-based community development, and you look at what the existing assets are of, like, what does a young person have? What do they need? And then being able to give them those opportunities to thrive.
Being able to do something that you can just go in your backyard and start to do as a youth is a good start to, I mean, in general, for the youth to find something to do and be creative with their minds, but also, give them that experience where, sometimes some of these skills come up even in, the grocery store, gas station, the convenience store jobs where, you could be getting some of these kids could be learning these skills and then be getting a raise inside some of these jobs that they're already in because they're showing, what they're doing. And a big part of, all of this really, and the core that really is going to keep this going is the mental health and the purpose. And then something that stands out in your work is the connection between mentorship, purpose, and mental health. How does meaningful work and mentorship help address the mental health challenges many young people are facing today, whether it's the Indigenous or the non-Indigenous in South Dakota?
Mental health is everything. I'm somebody I'd been sober for 11 and a half years. And on that journey, there was a pathway that I found to post-traumatic growth. And that's a miracle. It's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. But on that journey, I identified that being able to demonstrate, there's a group in Augustana University down in Sioux Falls led by Martin Broken Leg. And they have a concept of the circle of courage, where, you have longing, you have all these different components about mastery and generosity and so on. And when we see deficiencies in young people, they have this concept about how when kids are quote unquote acting out, so much of it is because they're not feeling belonging. They're not feeling mastery. They're not feeling generosity or any of these elements that are so critical to our psychosocial development. And so this mental health component of being able to understand that you're valued in the community, you're important. In your family of origin, you may not be experiencing that. I mean, I grew up in a very difficult family environment. And so being informed by that experience gives me the capacity to speak, understand, and to be able to develop these pathways. Because we've had times where, there have been youth in our community that have had, really severe suicidality. I mean, for the state of South Dakota, we had 198 suicide deaths in 2024, which was a 10% increase from 2023. And so this is a very real, very significant impact. And it's something that I've seen so many different places. We see young people when we're in it, and we see that there's this wealth of knowledge that, these community resilience organizations like Lost and Found, Boulder Crest, Martin Broken Legs organization have this depth of knowledge, this depth of understanding about what we need to be able to do that. And so if we can be able to create these pathways where a young person, when I first started the program, we had a young man that, had some challenges. And when he got here, I immediately identified, I saw exactly what it was. And I was like, hey man, I need you to drive my van across the street, because we loaded the tools up and we had a shop across the street we were using. And that kid perked up. I mean, everyone would say that kid has ADHD. Everybody would say that kid, is on a one-way pathway to no good. And I'm going to tell you, if you give him the opportunity to demonstrate his mastery, if you demonstrate that mastery, you will be amazed at what you see. And he might not have that opportunity at home, but in our shop environment, you get these opportunities and opportunities and opportunities, and there's this patience with it, and there's this understanding of like, look, you where you came from doesn't matter. It's who you are at your core, what direction you're going in. Because if we can be able to demonstrate that, we can significantly impact these mental health impacts. For the state of South Dakota, I mean, we're going to spend $2 billion over the next 10 years building prisons. And for as small of a tax base as we have as a state, I mean, we look at it on a humanitarian standpoint about like, these are human lives that are never going to, it's a wound when you get to the point where there's criminality involved, there's an impact that's occurred in somebody's life. Then when you're incarcerated, there's a further diminishing of our human experience. And so if we look at it as that this is a responsibility for our entire community. We talk about being a good relative, and I really value that in the conversations with Dakota, and Dakota communities, because there's this commonality about we're all interconnected. I mean, we are all able to go find these ways to build together, to be able to thrive together, and to create a successful society.
Yeah, and the prisons being built at that level is because of the unfortunate fact that we haven't been creating these systems for the youth. And I think what makes what you're doing a lot, brings it all together is the mental health and the workforce part, because you can have the workforce development by itself, but unfortunately, if the mental health part isn't there, isn't worked in somehow, that can fall through, and then you get that cycle of the prison, of the jail, of losing jobs. A lot of our this is something that I grew up in, was quitting jobs because jobs didn't really see jobs don't really focus on what the youth are good at, right? What you said, once you give the youth that opportunity to find their skill, you can watch them, excel pretty fast. And I think that's what, this is creating a model for that. Because in the regular corporate world, convenience stores, grocery stores, even factories, they're really just creating a depressing environment for the youth. When in reality, they have jobs that these youth could start developing in, that they would love to develop in. And so what you're doing is creating both those pathways. So you're also involved. That brings us to the conversation of your involvement with the Dakota Bridge Cooperative, which is focused on workforce development and infrastructure. How does that work connect young people to real opportunities and careers in South Dakota? Both non-Indigenous and Indigenous.
The Dakota Bridge Cooperative is intended as a non-extractive means of creating community strength across our region. And the Dakota Bridge Cooperative is an opportunity to look at, we have $1.7 billion worth of power infrastructure projects scheduled for installation within South Dakota over the next 2 years. There are existing training programs at Lake Area Technical College, at Mitchell Tech, at South Dakota Mines. There's union training programs with the laborers union, with the carpenters union, and so on, where they can be able to provide education over a period of time. So often we look at education as something that occurs in a building. And when we really start to look at and unpack what the experiences of so many of our tribal and rural communities, school can be a really complicated place. We think about, boarding school trauma. We think about the way in which school is perceived and experienced. Very much our parents' experience of education would become our experience of education. And so the capacity to really effectively look at non-traditional educational methods of, being able to have a deployed education training program with the Dakota Bridge Cooperative. We're under development with this. We've had grant requests out over the last year. We've been talking to a number of larger grant making organizations and also with the government, and the goal, and also with tribal governments, but the goal is to be able to create an on-site pre-apprenticeship program that teaches core skills, core capabilities. I look at, renewable energy as a natural fit. I had a conversation earlier today with the CEO of an additive manufacturing company in North Dakota. So we would colloquially call 3D printing, but being able to have these skill sets where you could have a training center in a shipping container or in a trailer on an 18-wheeler, so it doesn't feel like going to a classroom. It doesn't have, there's probably going to be a whiteboard or whatever, but it's not going to be sitting in chairs in a classroom. It might be sitting in chairs in a field or in some different environment. Being able to create that pathway so that you can gain the regular standard industry certifications, the OSHA 10, the OSHA 30. You can be able to get an education about finances, about what, your rights are as a worker. I mean, this is stuff that's really basic when we think about it. But when we get young people out in the working environment, I was aware of one young person who didn't get paid for like a month or two. I was working on this job, and it's tough because you want them to get the experience, and at the same time, the employers sometimes take advantage. And so there's this balance that we're working to be able to create. But with the Dakota Bridge Cooperative, it's seen as probably a worker-owned cooperative. There's a model called Mondragon in Spain that worked really well. It was done by a Catholic priest. And it was after the Spanish Civil War, and they just started teaching people workforce skills. You teach people workforce skills, you end up building cooperatives off of the workforce skills, and then you have these fully owned enterprises that become, something that lifts the workers up and then can be able to give that long-term wealth generation for the community.
And that long-term wealth is what, we're looking to build, with what the standards that have been set now. It's kind of, it's based off of, the season, depending on who is in office, depending on who is funding what at the time. And I think once you get that community involved, and you kind of show them how this can work and how you can pull together to create this opportunity in the mental health, and in the same time the cultural aspect, because a lot of people who are working in South Dakota, as far as Indigenous people, they're working on the lands that our people were essentially working on. A lot of Dakota, we were out in the prairies, finding, hunting. So I think what it does for our culture is that it brings us outside of like we used to, like for hunting, we'd leave our community, we'd get work done, we'd come back. And I think that's something that would really help the Indigenous community kind of see the outside world, but also still be in treaty territory, still be doing something for their immediate community. I think that's the big part is, like you said, a lot of kids are getting pulled away to different states for colleges, and then a lot of times the opportunity is around those college areas. They're like, I think corporations or businesses that do that on purpose, obviously, but I think once we create that opportunity in the community, and then tribes and other, cities, states, governances see that, it'll really catch on and work in different ways, because North Dakota, South Dakota is a lot of agriculture, a lot of, the energy development area. Here in Minnesota, it's, there's a lot of different industries in Minnesota compared to North Dakota. So I'm hoping what you're doing can really show the rest of the United States that they can do the same exact thing in their area, keep youth in their area, and also create this mentally healthy and community driven, initiative. Basically, the foundation that we didn't receive. So that's what we're doing now. So I really like this conversation, and looking ahead of 10 to 15 years. what would success look like for the work you're doing to build stronger workforce pathways for rural and tribal communities in South Dakota and beyond?
Hope and the desire of this program is to create long-term sovereignty for our tribal nations. Because that's the part that's been so frustrating in the last years. We look at the government shutdowns, how that impacts so many elements of what our tribal communities are experiencing. So we look at if you are building a wind turbine in Phillips, South Dakota, or in Toronto, South Dakota, and you learn the process, the procedures, you make a network within that community of whoever the contractor is building that wind turbine. If you have that network, you have that capacity, and you learn how to be able to build that. You learn what success looks like. You build that site picture of exactly how do I build this? How do I create this? Then you have the capacity to take that skill set home. And this is the piece that's so important because this is the piece that I hear about all the time is that there's been horrific bad actors working with tribal communities. And, there was one story I heard of a group that had got together, got money to purchase a used wind turbine, installed it, and the machine was defective. And it was known defective when it was shipped out and sold. And so you look at to change that dynamic, it requires being in non-tribal lands, but building these components and then being able to build that capacity back home. Because if you do that, you take away the control elements. Like you take away we need to rely on somebody for OEM and all of this. We can really fundamentally have our tribal communities have that sovereignty, have that power, have that confidence. Because I think so much of it is that there's been a game of it's like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, where it's like, oh, we're going to do this. And then it gets taken away and it's not anybody's fault. People are acting in good faith in the tribal communities, but there's this need to really invest and to build this opportunity because I think about it in the state of South Dakota, it's between 100,000 and 120,000 tribal members within the state of South Dakota. We have communities that have, great workforce, great capability, great knowledge. And if we can really be able to unlock that capacity within these communities, think about the great growth that will come from that. Because if you build an economic engine in the next 10 to 20 years that exists, that has thriving communities, that has that capacity to really go demonstrate the mastery, the generosity, all of these things, we can completely change the dynamic within our state. Then maybe we'll only spend 5 billion on prisons. I mean, this is the type of thing, because if you don't have employment, if you don't have employment opportunities, and so many of our tribal communities are 100 miles from the interstate, you don't know. You don't know what's available in the world. And so you're used to what's familiar and what's comfortable with you. But if we can build this capacity there, then our communities can be able to thrive, grow, and develop. And there's so much good work being done with it right now. I mean, you look at Red Cloud Energy, just got a Bush Foundation grant, and they have an amazing program over in Pine Ridge where there's solar charging stations, which is very timely with the changes in fuel prices. But you have these solar charging stations, you have an investment available for that, and you have the ability to be able to create that network across that community of being able to have true power sovereignty. And the more that we build that, the stronger we will be for everybody within our state.
And I'm actually really excited because one of the areas you're working in is kind of right below my reservation, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. And for us, 8,000 members on reservation and about 8,000 off. So what this does and what I see for the future in this is getting workforce opportunity near our reservation is going to bring people back home. One of the bigger things, reason why a lot of tribal members are half of the members or more are off the reservation is because there isn't any workforce opportunity. And a lot of them are driving to these bigger cities, which is, 3, 4 hours away. And then sometimes it makes more sense to just live by those cities. And so in this process of not having work, we're pulling people from their culture, their traditions, their values, and that's creating a crisis in itself. And that's one I've seen, and you've heard me talk about that. But for our people to have that something like that, like you said, there is some work being done, and in combined, connecting all these together, I think would bring a lot of people home, and that in itself is measurable impact for our communities. bringing the youth home, bringing anyone home to start work and start to contribute to South Dakota in general. Because for me, I think if we bring everything, if we start, every state needs to bring everything to their state. They need to, every state has that ability. Every state is, you know, and for right now, I think the federal government has been involved in all the states for so long that states are not, forgot that we could come together. And for as far as, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, that's, those three combined could create a huge, you know, multi-state economy and workforce development, place. So, this is an amazing opportunity. And for the young people, everyone who's, joining the workforce or thinking about it, listening right now, who might feel uncertain about their future, what message would you want them to hear today?
One, we really need you. This is the part that I want to make sure gets communicated, because you might be in an environment where you're told that you don't have value. And that is a lie. We really, really need you. We need you involved. We need you participating. We need you to be available. We also know that you have great capacity. You have great capability. You have a great ability to learn. And choosing to be a lifetime learner gives you the ability to learn these different skill sets to build you into a full person. And so it's oftentimes can feel really intimidating. It's going to in a different environment. It's going to learn things that you don't know anything about. But I got to tell you, it's worth it. It's the most fun. When I got into the trades, it just unlocked something in me. It was so satisfying. There were so many things that I built. I had been on a couple of small projects when I was a kid. I was an Eagle Scout, and we rehabilitated a bridge and worked on a trail in that project. And that really built a lot of self-esteem within me. Within SotaSoDak, we've got a cabin that we're building. We've got a whole bunch of different things that we've got young people leading the project with. And so really understanding that there's adults in this community that see your capacity, that want to see you be successful, and we need you. I mean, that's the really important part is, video games can be fun for a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's going out there and it's building things that build our society, that built you, and that can be able to generate quite a bit of wealth. And you don't need to have a college degree to be able to do it. Sometimes there can be apprenticeships, either unions, or there can be educational technical schools that can give you such a great base to operate from, to build a great life and to really build sovereignty in your community, so that you can long-term have these capacities built, developing, growing here and long into the future.
What an amazing conversation. And it's one I hope we can continue. I know you have a lot of things going on, and I can't wait for the updates. And we'll keep, doing episodes like this with you, Gary. But for today, thank you for joining us and sharing the work you're doing to build opportunity and pathways for the next generation. To everyone listening, thank you for tuning into the Red Shirt Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to follow, share the episode, and stay connected as we continue bringing forward voices working to build stronger communities across Indian country and rural America. Thank you, Gary.